We are rural women. We are strong. We're ambitious. We're leaders. And we inspire. Some of us are mothers and caregivers, partners, workers and community members, friends. And we don't do it alone. We seek community, connection, and representation of people like us. 100 Rural Women plants that seed. We aim to cultivate a community that empowers rural women and lifts one another up. Welcome to our Spotlight series, where we interview amazing women who are making a difference for rural communities across Minnesota, because we believe that women like you deserve a spotlight. Welcome back to our Spotlight series. I am really excited to be here with Susan. She is a really incredible person that's going to be a part of our community here. And I'm not going to introduce you too much. I'm going to let you tell us about yourself, include, your name, occupation, what kind of brought you there, and your education.
Okay, well, my name is Susan Joyce, and I'm retired, or at least trying to be. I'm pushing my late 70s, and I think it's the only thing I've ever failed at in life is not retiring in the traditional sense, but I'm having a great time. But I'm a retired Wall Street financial advisor, and I'm also the founder and director of the Women's Financial Focus Groups of Minnesota, and I researched and developed a very unique female-friendly method of wealth management based on neuroscience and a lot of research, years of research. And then I published two books, wrote and published two books on that subject and made them available in every public library in the state of Minnesota. I'm hoping to get it into other states, but right now, Minnesota, all libraries can get a copy of that book or those books. And then I also write novels about Wall Street. I say not entirely fiction novels about Wall Street, but they are. And I've got one published. I'm working on two more that are in the process. And I also run a world-renowned writers group. And, before I did all of that, I was a wife and a mother of three children. They're all grown and married, and I have 9 grandchildren. I have 1 grandson-in-law, and I have 4 great-grandchildren. So, but I managed to get it all done. It's just a busy life.
Oh my gosh, I never would have. First of all, I wouldn't have expected that you're in your late 70s.
Thank you.
And I am really, really interested to dive more into that aspect of protecting your finances as a woman in particular, and really boosting that work that you've done. And I think that that is super important. And honestly, like, money is something that has kind of been hushed a bit, like you don't talk about it, but it is super important because it is something that it makes our world go round. So how do you feel like that is important for rural women?
It's important for every woman, absolutely every woman. Money's not the objective. Your life is the objective, but money here in the United States is one of our greatest resources. So when you manage one of your greatest resources effectively, your dreams are bound to come true. You're bound to fulfill your life. And I say, well, if you lived in the Amazon jungle, one of your greatest resources would not be money there. That wouldn't do you any good, but a sharp spear would. You'd have to learn how to use that spear. It'd have to protect you. It would have to, kill your food. It would provide for you. So that's how important money is here in the United States to American women. And, the problem with it is we have, like you say, there's a lot of stigma about money. There's associations like, money is evil and the root of all evil. Well, it's not. It's the purposes that might be, but learning how to manage it is certainly not evil, by any means. with women, I think one of the things that hold them back is the entire financial industry, banking, insurance, investment, taxes, law. It was all created by men for men. So whenever a woman even walks into a bank or insurance office, investment office, a tax office, or a lawyer's office, and you have to do all five to manage your money. These are all the aspects. When they walk into these kinds of offices, it kind of feels like they just walked into a men's bathroom by mistake. All the right stuff is there for them to do their business, but it just doesn't feel right. And what women do is they go into either a fight or flight mode. And the women who stick it out and think that they're handling things just fine are really in kind of a fight mode. They're protective, they're on guard. And the other ones just flight or never even come. They avoid money management altogether because they just hate it. And there's studies that indicate women would rather die, than talk about money, let alone deal with it. I know, it's crazy. And it took me a while to find this out because, as a financial advisor, I was involved with money and it didn't bother me. So I can figure out why it bothered, all these other women. But as a financial advisor, I witnessed this. And after years or decades, of this, I thought, why are they reluctant? Why do they acquiesce so quickly to a man to tell them, their father, their husband? So that's what prompted the research, and it took me years before I found it, but I found it, and that's what the books reveal. So the books are not a how-to so much. It's once you have some wealth, when you have an income, when you have a job, when you because your future money, your future earning is part of your wealth, something you have to manage. It's not just what you have in your pocket or your savings account. So managing all of that is a mindset. And that's what the book, and here's the book. It's Real Women Manage Wealth, Financial Security Once and for All Forever. And then I created a workbook that goes along with it called the Personal Finance Notebook. And that's a step-by-step guide. It even gives you places to, write in, and you keep this. It's like your own personal diary.
Right.
These are the only two books that any woman needs to achieve financial security in all situations under any circumstance throughout her life. For married women, divorced women, single women, widows. That's it. Because you don't have to know everything about finances. You have to learn how to effectively work with the professionals because everything changes all the time. And you have to be up to date on it. You can't possibly, you're busy living your life and having your career. You don't need to be the expert in banking, insurance, investment, taxes, and law, for goodness sakes. So how to deal with the professional advisors out there is what these books show them and prepare them to understand too. So when they go talk to them, they know what questions to ask and they know how to form their questions and how to bring up their concerns correctly. And that's it. And the girls that have done this, the women who have taken, the step and that have come back and told me about it, says it's mind blowing. It has changed their way of thinking about money. It puts them in control of their wealth in a way that they never thought possible. And they no longer are nodding to the financial advisor like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. Tell me what to do. They're not doing that anymore. They're saying, this is what I want. How can you help me? And they're listening and they're taking notes. It's just a different method. It's not hard. And the neuroscience behind it is I tapped into innate female traits. Women were born to manage wealth. They just aren't using those traits in wealth management processes. And I show them how to do it.
I'm feeling so inspired to go buy your books right now. I definitely want to read them. I think especially as somebody who recently graduated from college and all of the adult things feel pretty overwhelming. And so having these resources and somebody who really knows the field and is just so helpful, especially because it does feel overwhelming. Like the idea of managing money and all of that is just, it's a lot, and it's not something that I have any type of, I don't even know the right word for it, but like knowledge about. And so I never would have thought about knowing financial literacy specifically for women. I wouldn't have thought that there's a difference between men and women. So I'm really interested to hear or to read about what that difference really is. And I really appreciate that piece that you said, that it's essentially stands the test of time, because it's not necessarily about what's current, but about knowing the questions to ask. And that's the important piece, is knowing how to not get taken advantage of in those situations, or knowing that those professionals might also not super know what they're doing is best for you.
Exactly. You said it perfectly, Alexa. The thing is that you already know everything you need to know to effectively manage your wealth. You don't have to learn a thing. You already know it. And that's because the only person that knows what you want in your life is you. And that's what your money should be going towards. And so you have to learn how to convey that effectively to bankers, insurance agents, investment advisors, tax advisors, lawyers, how to gather the information and the advice that they give you as options, and not be sold their products when they're trying to sell them to you, but to gather the information. Then you go home, and in the privacy of your own home, you compare what a banker can do in that situation for you for this specific goal, what an insurance agent can do, what an investment advisor can do, what a tax policy might do, and what a lawyer might do. And what you'll want to know is the cost of each of these, getting into it, the cost overall, and then the complexity. If you don't understand it, I say don't buy it. I'm a tenured financial professional, and there is tons of financial products I wouldn't touch because I don't know them, or they're so complicated I can't understand them. And if you don't know them and understand them yourself, you cannot manage them, and you're the one who needs to manage them. You're going to get advice as to certain things, but you better understand how those things that you buy work for you, and how you can evaluate if they're effective for you or not. And so it's important, but you're the one who already knows that, because you know your capabilities, you know what you can afford. So the cost is going to be easy for you to decide once you start asking those questions of all the different advisors. And women shop. They're excellent shoppers. They have always been excellent, but they have a 5-step decision-making process, and that's what makes them a good financial wealth managers, because they'll go out and once they learn how, they go out and ask the right questions, they shop around, they compare, they challenge people, they talk to their friends, and then they buy. Men don't. They have a 1-step decision-making process. I need socks, that's socks, buy socks, that's it. They don't process anything. They don't evaluate near as much as women do. And I'm not trying to stereotype anybody, because I know that there's men that do and there's women that don't. I'm one, but for the most part, the bulk, the female culture, is such, and the female gender has certain traits that a male gender doesn't. And this is chapter 2 of the book, Real Women Manage Wealth, is about the gender differences. It helps to understand these gender differences. I have a psychology minor, so this was kind of right up my alley, to be reading white papers and neurological studies and gender differences. And I even attended some refresher courses in college on gender differences. And so it was right up my alley to do that, but it was really eye-widening. And I think uniquely, nobody else in the world that I know of has come up with what I've come up with, because it would take, one, a good working knowledge of the psychology and the gender differences of women, plus a thorough understanding of the financial industry. The fact that I was in the financial industry as long as I was, and I was award-winning, so I was in there working a lot, I wasn't, minor positions. And the fact that I had a thorough understanding of this financial industry and had the psychology, background, and put the two together, it was because I saw what the financial industry was that I could form the conclusions that I did.
I think that knowledge is power, and it's your best, I don't want to say it's a weapon, but it is defense, I guess. And so, yeah,
Well,
I
I think
definitely,
two things is that, I don't think that, investment advisors or any financial professional is out there to get anybody. They're not that, but they can't help somebody that's not asking the right questions. If
mm,
you go in and say, I have, $20,000 and I don't know what to do with it, what should I do with it? Well, they'll say, buy my product or service, if that's what you're asking. They don't know why you need it. But if you go in and say, I would like to get my student loans all paid off before I'm, 30 years old. And then I want to have a baby before I'm 35. And then I want to, buy a house or whatever. And you have specific goals and whatever. And you say, and then I have $20,000 and yet I don't want to, be bereft and I want to plan for my retirement as well. If you tell them specifically what you want to do, then they can say, okay, well, I have products and services that'll help you this way. And here's how much they'll cost. And this is the likelihood of them achieving, your goals in your time frame. And then you go to the next financial advisor and you say that you ask them the same thing. Here's my goals. This is what I want. Here's my concerns, and how can you help me? And they'll say, well, this is the products and services I have, which are all different. A banker can solve investment issues just as well as an investment advisor can, and they can do things that lawyers can do. So you go in with the same questions, and then by asking them what each one can do and the cost of everything and the complexity, then you take notes, and then you go home and you'll be able to lay them out once you've talked to 5 people or more. Then you can say, well, this one's going to do that. I understand that. I just still can't get my head around this one, so I'll never buy it until I do. And so now it gets narrowed down, and that's when you'll make the best decision for you.
yeah. Yeah, I think that everybody could use an advisor like that.
Well, I give seminars, I do this periodically, given a couple this year and for women. And then I stay connected, with them. And I do have women that will email me questions and stuff. And I can't give them answers. I'm no longer licensed. I couldn't give anybody financial advice, but I can show you how to get the advice that you need. And that's what sometimes people still have help, still need some help. But that's my passion. You can tell. I mean, I can just go on this. Anything that helps empower women has always, been what I've strived for. I've been involved a lot with business and professional women. They were the voice of working women, pay equity and fairness in the workplace, sexual harassment. And, even though a lot of things, we worked very hard through BPW to get things, put into law. And we lobbied legislation, basically. And even though there's been laws on the books for years that have protected women, whatever, the Me Too movement shows us how good that's been going,
Right.
since the 60s, there's sexual harassment laws, and it's still, prevalent.
Mm.
So we have a long way to go. And even with wage imparities, we're still only at, I think, like 83 cents on the dollar to a man's dollar, doing the same job, same educational requirements and stuff.
Based off of all of this, I mean, you're clearly very passionate. How did you go from being a financial professional to then becoming an author? Those are 2 completely different fields. So what really got you into that position to be publishing a book? And could you tell us a little bit more about those steps for an author?
Sure. I would be happy to. What got me going with that is the beginning of my career, I was actually a commercial artist, and commercial art led to writing because it's connected with the publishing, industry. And I started writing, realizing that was really my true calling, even though I had studied art and thought I was going into that field. I wound up fascinated with writing, and it just pulled me. My heart was just connected to writing. And then that led on to, I was a reporter. I got into investigative reporting. I covered local, state, and federal government. So I was a government reporter. That was my beat. So the more I learned as a reporter, because you can get in places no one else can and ask questions and really learn, it was very exciting. But then I also did public relations work and eventually did technical writing for an agricultural firm. And so all of those things helped me write. But while I'm writing, I always wanted to write a novel. And I couldn't wait until I wrote a novel. And I did have a brief moment when my kids were all grown and gone that I thought, oh, maybe I could, quit work and, do this. So I tried writing a novel in 6 months. I went crazy because it's like, I just still needed to work then, So I went back to work and thought, all right, I'm going to hold this off until I retire. So it had been all along my plan. And part of my plan is the financial planning of making sure that I was in a spot in which I could write. We're living in a turn of the century home in southern Minnesota that we went looking to find a place for me to write and to be inspired by. So that's part of my financial plan. And as you can see, this is my office. I have a coffee cup and a cup warmer right by a window that overlooks our garden. This is a planned thing, and this is what women should do. They don't plan for what they really, really want. And I did and got it. My husband's needs were also not ignored. He's doing what he wants to do too, but mine were part of the planning. And so I did want to do that, but then how I got going in I didn't plan on writing these, the nonfiction books. I didn't plan on writing that. When I first retired, I just delved into writing my novel. And as I got going with that, I started getting calls from, we lived up in the cities at that time, and I got calls from city people, other female financial advisors who wanted to know what I had done up in the cities, because I was already had the Women's Financial Focus Group, and I was doing focus groups on a monthly basis, and I was teaching women in different seminars, and it was working so well, word was getting around, and they said, well, are you still doing that? And I said, no. And they said, do you want to? And I said, no. And they said, well, could we talk you into it? And I said, I don't think so. Two of them came down, spent a day here trying to talk me into it. And I was still pretty much I just really want to write my novel. But what happened is when I got into life, just my friends were saying really bizarre things, letting me know that they needed help financially, and not because they were bereft, because all our friends are doctors, lawyers, and whatever. We run in a different circle. And so these women were all women of substance, but they were saying some pretty silly things about their money and how they were handling it. And I thought, they really need to learn this stuff. So really, to put my head on a pillow, I had to write a book. I had to put it all together in a book so that there it is, ladies. You can do it yourself now, and I can sleep and I can write my novels.
So what is that process like for going about getting published for somebody who may be an aspiring author, including myself?
Yeah, well, I've always described an author as somebody who cannot not write. If you just have to put things down, you got ideas in your head, you have to get them out. I believe that that's your form of expression, your form of creative expression too. So you can't stop that. So that's kind of a barometer to see if you've got what it takes to really, work on really big projects. As if you're already like that, well, yep, you're an author then. Then the process is to create a manuscript, finish that manuscript. And you said that you were kind of interested in writing YA. And so that's about 50 to 70,000 words, somewhere right on there. I'm not that familiar with the rules of that genre because I don't write YA. And there are rules of genre. So you'll kind of want to know what those rules are before you start writing, so you know what's expected of you. And the reason why there's rules is that there's already developed readers out there, readers who want to read YA. There's readers who want to read literary fiction. There's readers who want to read just romance or just thrillers or just suspense. And so if you're writing along those lines, if your story fits into one of those things, understanding the genre rules and what your readers are going to expect will help you create that story in a way that will resonate with those readers, and then make it much more saleable and much more successful for you. So that's kind of the first thing, is just kind of know what you're doing and get your head around what that genre is about, what your story might compare to in the same genre, because you'll have to help people sell it, once you get it sold and published. So where will it fit in the Barnes and Noble? Will it be in this section or that section? So those are kinds of things just to kind of be aware of. But basically, don't curb any creative juices that you have. Just write, just write. Don't worry about if it's right or wrong or whatever. Just flop it out in that first draft. Get that first draft done. And then once you have the first draft done, step away for a month or 2 months, so that you kind of forget things. And then you come back at it a little bit more fresh and you'll read through it. And that's when you'll see holes or things that need to be filled in or something that needs to be pumped up, and then rewrite, do some rewrites and revisions, on your story. And then when you think that story is everything that you want it to be, then send your manuscript to beta readers, and they can be people or people that just volunteer to do that. And a beta reader is somebody that will take your manuscript and just read it and tell you if they like it, if they didn't like it, and why or why not, where you put them to sleep, where they just lost interest, where there were holes, some obvious things. And beta readers can be very important in that process because they catch some of the big mistakes and they catch some of the plot arc issues. And then you take it back and you revise again. There's a lot of revision in writing. And so you revise it again, you clean it up as best you can until this is the best you can do. Then you give it to an editor, and you'll have to pay an editor to have that done. If you're looking at novel writing, you'll have to hire an editor, even to submit it for any publishing company. You've got to have an edited copy. And that'll cost anywhere from, maybe $1,000, $2,000 to get your manuscript edited well. And you can find good editors by asking other published authors. They've had to do that, so they've got experience with some different editors and can give you some references. And then once it's edited, and all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and it's cleaned up and whatever, that's when you decide how you're going to publish. What is a good fit for you? And there's 2 ways to go: traditional publishing. There's some intermediate publishing like University Press and small independent presses and stuff, or the big 5, HarperCollins and Random House and Penguin and things like that. Or you can self-publish. And if you decide to go traditional publishing, and that is then going to require, you're going to have to write query letters and find yourself an agent, because no big publisher will even consider you without an agent. So you have to get a literary agent to represent you. You can't just go hire one. I wish we could. Literary agents, you have to submit part of your manuscript to them, a query letter of who you are, how marketable you would be, and how willing you would be to revise things to a certain degree. And then you find the right literary agent that says, yeah, I'm looking for a story like that. I think I can peddle it to, publishers. They'll pick you up. You never have to pay a publisher or a literary agent upfront. If you do, they're not reputable. They're not legitimate. Literary agents are going to be looking for a good manuscript that they can peddle to a publisher, and they'll make their money when you make your royalties. They'll take a portion of your royalties, and so will the publisher. So it shouldn't cost you anything. And then an agent will walk you through everything else. They have their editors and their revision, developmental editors and proofreaders and cover designs and title. Even the title of your manuscript is probably going to be determined by a publisher, not you. So that is one option to go. And the ups and downs of that, there's ups and downs to it. I mean, once you go with a traditional publisher, you sign the rights of your manuscript away. They now own it. And they will tell you, usually it's in the contract that says you have to do the revisions that they want. So if they say, I want you to change the name of your character, I want you to change this plot element, you have to write it and do it the way they want, because it's their book now. You're just the author that will revise it according to what they want. So that's the downside of going with a traditional publisher. Some of your smaller presses don't make you revise so heavily or don't have a bigger clout, but they too will sometimes buy your manuscript and require certain things and then keep the bulk of the royalty. They'll pay you, but after they get paid. And so the payment, the royalty issues, the promotional opportunities, because traditional publishers obviously can promote your book a whole lot more. Typically, your big five will sink in about $150,000 into a debut author just to get them positioned for the public and to get enough advertising out there and to give them enough author events, book signings, appearances, interviews and whatever, just to get out there to be able to sell books. They usually have about a 2-week window. And if your book doesn't hit the bestseller list in those 2 weeks, they'll drop selling your book and you don't get your manuscript back, and there you sit. So there's some big downsides of going with traditional publishers. What's happened in the last 10 years, when I first started writing my first novel, it took me 11 years to get this one published, to get it written, and then rewriting and finally publishing. But in that length of time, self-publishing has opened up tremendously, and it has taken a new position in respect in the book world. At one time, it was like, well, they were pretty shabby, because no real editing was done or whatever. But now you hire your own editors, you hire your cover designers. When you self-edit, you have to, format everything. You have to find a print-on-demand service and there's several of them out there, but you have to format everything electronically, including your cover and the spine. And so there's a lot to kind of know, but if I can do it, anybody can. Let's put it that way. I'm not born in the tech world. I'm 70-some years old, remember. I had transistor radios when I was a kid. So if I can do it, anybody can. But it is a little bit more of a learning curve for some people to be able to do that. But there again, you can hire people that actually will format for you and get it downloaded into a print-on-demand. Now, print-on-demand service is a service that will print one book at a time for $5. So you can print 20, but it doesn't, the cost of printing that book doesn't really go down with the number, where traditional publishers, you have to order like 10,000 before you can get the book down, every book down to a cost that is even a reasonable cost. That's why hardcover books are often $20, $30 because it costs so much to print them. So now the print-on-demand books, and this I self-published, and they're just as good a quality as anything else. The type, the borders, the print, the jackets, everything. So it is now an option to go. I was initially, because Root really has a message that is so universal across the nation for people to know what was going on Wall Street at the time the global financial collapse was, rearing up. So initially I thought I would go with a traditional publisher so I could get that book out to more people. But then when I got to the editor part, my editor said my 180, I think I had 180,000 word manuscript had to be whittled down to 70,000 because the debut author should be within 50 to 70,000 words. No publishers, especially the big ones, are not going to take a chance on a manuscript as big as the one that I had with a debut author. I have no track record. And so they're like, well, we don't know if it's going to fly or not. And every page costs money to print and to ship to bookstores and whatnot. So this is a business aspect, of why they won't take on debut authors with manuscripts that are too large. So in order for me to be considered by a traditional publisher, I had to scale it down. So I spent 3 or 4 years rewriting that whole book into 2 different kinds of points of view. And then when I did that, I got it done, and I thought, well, it's no longer the story that I wanted to tell. I really needed more words to tell what I needed to tell. And so then I had to think, well, what do I do? And I reconsidered my options. And by that time, self-publishing was a viable option. And so I chose to go self-publishing because it left me with the story that I felt I needed to put into a book form. because this is a play. Now, maybe other books I would be more willing to cut down and make more, suitable to the publishing industry. But with Rook, it wasn't. It had been with me since I went through that. I was on the deck of that ship when it went down, and I had so much to tell and so much to let people see that I couldn't tell it in any less words. So I self-published, and then I debuted it in March of 2020. And if you'll recall, that was, yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, okay. I think, it was such a disappointment to, first of all, spend 11 years writing my novel and getting it into book form, and then to debut in the very month that we go into a pandemic and a shutdown for the next year. So that wiped out all my author events that I had set up and all the promotion things that I was hoping to do. I couldn't do it. And so I kind of missed that window of opportunity, but I did not give up. I kept going. It was like, one, I still kept writing my books. I'm working on the other 2 novels that are going to be part of the Wall Street series. And I got it out there, and I did whatever I could, and I just kept plowing through. And now it's 2022, it's 2 years afterwards, and I am totally in the black, with sales of Rook. And one thing, when you self-publish, you get to keep the royalties. You don't have to share it with anybody. So it's a little easier to earn that money back, too. So you don't make enough to quit the day job. You'll probably, if you want to write novels and whatnot, that's wonderful, but wait until you make the big time, if you ever do, before you quit the day job. And that's kind of where I was at when I stopped in 92 and tried to write a novel. I kept realizing that this is going to cost me my income, and I can make more income working than I can hoping if I'm going to sell a book. But I think with novelists specifically, is that there's no place for them to shine unless they are published. Singers sing. There's all kinds of ways people, can express themselves: singing, dancing, musicians, theater, art. There's galleries in every town for artists. There's community theaters for everybody who wants to act. There's gigs for any musician all over the place. Singers can sing at weddings and funerals and at church and, a variety of places. But if you're a novelist and you aren't published, you collect dust. There's no place for you to display. But self-publishing has made that possible, because now you can self-publish and your book can be out there and your friends can read it and your community can read it. And I don't know how many, books I've sold of Rook, but I'm getting royalty check. It's sold on Amazon.com, too. And so I'm getting royalty checks from them, regularly every month, but I don't know who's buying them or where. So, but it's not enough to support yourself on.
Right. So there's the aspect of advertising and promotion that is a benefit of going with a big time publisher. However, you lose your creative freedom.
You do. Mm-hmm. Some, if you're John Grisham or Stephen King, and you get an agent and a publisher, they're going to kind of let you do what you want to do. But there really is. Dean Koontz is an author that I read a lot of, and he writes suspense, kind of things. And he veered off. He was a big enough author to have veered off from his standard, what he writes, basically, and the characters that he was using and stuff. And he wrote, I think, one of his best novels ever, but his publishers and literary agent only let him write that one. And the rest, he had to go back and use the characters. You might be familiar with William Kent Kruger. He's a Minnesota author, writes about northern Minnesota stuff. He and I were at the same author event 2 months ago. And he was saying too that his author or his publisher wants him to continue using the same characters in certain books. that he can't veer off from them, and he really would like to, but he can't. So there is some restrictions. Once you develop certain characters, a setting, and have a following, it stands to reason why your publisher would want you to repeat that over and over again. It's a sure sell. So yeah, self-publishing, you have a lot more freedom. You have total freedom over everything you do. And that was important to me because, like I say, I'm in my 70s and I'm failing at retirement, in the traditional sense, relax, golf, travel. No, I haven't got time. I'm writing and I'm doing other events and things, but I wanted the control. And this sounds really pompous of me to say, but I really didn't want to take the chance that I would reach the bestseller list, because if I did, my life as I know it in my retirement would be gone. I wouldn't be able to start my day with a cup of coffee and sit and look at the window. I'd be under the gun having to make the revisions or meet the deadlines or write the next novel, under a certain deadline. And, it didn't appeal to me, not at this stage in life.
Oh, this is all so good to know. I know that you said that you have some seminars, some different groups. What are some ways that you create change in your community and support other women?
Great question. Years ago, before I retired, I was, a mover and a shaker. I was involved with a lot of organizations and things like Rotary, and they worked to stamp out polio and various things around the world. Zonta International was very focused on violence, women and girls, the violence against them. Business and professional women, like I mentioned before, and then also the National Association of Female Executives. These are very strong voices for working women. So I think, I got involved with them. So there's the membership obligation, just being a member and putting your membership money and donations and supporting other people that are doing things in those organizations is one way. Anybody can do it. But I also got involved with the leadership thing. I did 2 terms as a local president of Business and Professional Women, and then I was legislative chair for 8 years. And then I also worked on the state level with event planning and speech writing and things like that too. So I think, what I would encourage all women to do is, pick your passions and then find things that support it. And an organization can do so much more than what one person can do individually. But along those lines, I still taught Sunday school and was a women's activist on a lot of issues. But now as I'm retired, I'm working a little bit more, more personally, more one-on-one. And with that, I mentored single moms for a period of 4 years. And I'm still in touch with 2 of the girls. One is now a business owner. The other one is in graduate school. So there's some real rags to riches and down in the dumps to, really succeeding stories there. And then I've also, I write seminars. I wrote the books. I've got the books in all the libraries in the state of Minnesota so that they're accessible to women. They're also in bookstores and online, Amazon.com. So, that's probably the biggest lasting contribution I'm giving is my books. They'll last forever. But then there's things like, what else have I done? Oh, the women's financial focus groups, of course, running pilot groups. I can't think of anything else right now, but it seems like I'm busy.
You really need to add anything else. I think that you have certainly contributed a lot to the community in different ways. And I also really appreciate that you said that you've got your books in libraries as well, because, as an author, of course you want to be supported financially by people purchasing your books, but it also shows that ultimately at your core, you really want to help people because you just want it to be accessible. And
that's right.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, very much so.
So given all of this life experience, if you could give a piece of advice to your former self, what would it be and why?
Oh, and why? Okay, well, pay attention to politics. It took me a while, but politics and political policies that are, put before Congress and whatnot is integral to your financial well-being as much so as religion is to your moral compass. It is that integral. And so I would say pay attention, to what's happening. And, I look at the protests in Iran with the overhead scarves. And we can think, wow, that's just, that would never happen here. But it did. And in my lifetime, in the 40s, I was born in the 40s, all the way into nearly 1960. In fact, it went into the 1960s. 3 states had banned women from wearing shorts. And New York even slapped on a $25 fine and 25 days in jail for if a woman was caught wearing shorts in public. And these are Bermuda shorts.
I just can't even believe that.
I know. Look it up. It's real.
Wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago because I'm here and this happened in my lifetime. In 1973, since the beginning of this country in 1776, for 200 years, women could not own property without a male cosigner. It was 1973 before a woman could even open a checking account, savings account, or a credit card in her name without a male cosigner. In 1973, I had 3 children. I was the mother of 3 children in 1973. My youngest was a year old before I could even go out and open a credit card without my husband's signature. Before that, I had to get my father's signature, my grandfather's signature to buy a car. You couldn't get anything.
Is that kind of a piece of why you feel drawn to this organization?
I think it's why I've always been drawn to empowering women, because I've seen the disparities, about that. I've argued with friends over the kitchen table to actually getting out there with signs and doing something, and then legislatively lobbying to, get legislation done to equal the playing field for women. And I have 2 sons, that I don't want anything taken away from them. So it's not because I'm against men or I'm, mad that they've got more rights. No, not at all. I just want more fair rights for women, so absolutely. But I think, one of the reasons why I would give women that advice is to pay attention to politics is something that I would have, rather have known, but it's something that I also encourage women to do, because as a financial advisor, I realized the disparities of how public policy, how political policy really affects certain asset classes differently. And the average person doesn't even recognize this well. But there's really no party is right or wrong. There isn't a right way. There's no one size fits all. What's wrong is for people not to realize how certain party policies will affect them financially. And it's not cut and dry,
Yeah. I appreciate your insight so much. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, ideas, and especially your passion with us. I'm really excited for you to be a part of our community and our organization, and for everybody to get to know you too.